and on, we're going to do a series on the time I spent in the military, which was slightly less than 3 years. And so it is probably a good idea if I do a little housekeeping here and chronology. So I went to ROTC at William & Mary, which is in Williamsburg, Virginia, in those days known as the College of William & Mary in Virginia. They've shortened it up since. And got my commission as a second lieutenant in June of 1964. Headed off to graduate school, went out to University of Missouri, got a master's, almost a PhD, before I gave up the ghost in 1966, summer of, late spring of 1966, went over to St. Louis, went to work at the NBC station in St. Louis in June, but I'd already had this obligation of 2 years to the Army, and for which they had paid me $18.50 or something like that, all through my undergraduate years at William & Mary. So for 18 bucks a month, I had wound up as an officer with 2-year obligation. And not much was going on in 64, but by the time I was getting my master's in 66, Vietnam was cranking up, and we were getting all involved there. So in any case, the military and government was friendly. They let me go off to work at the station in St. Louis for 3 or 4 months or so. And then in September 66, I went into the Army. I was commissioned as an ordnance officer. Makes no sense at all. Nonetheless, the Army has a way of picking out things for you. And so I was sent to Aberdeen Proving Grounds, which is in Maryland, where they had all the ordnance stuff. And Edgewater Arsenal was down the street, and they had, by the way, they just had built and finished I-95. That road was white in those days, no longer a white road and no longer empty by any means. It was common, and probably still is, to take new officers when you come into the Army, give you 9 weeks of get you back up to speed, as if I was ever up to speed as an officer. But we spent 9 weeks at Aberdeen Proving Grounds. And then toward the end of that, they said, well, here's where we're gonna send you now that you're up to speed. And they decided to send me off to supply school down in Virginia. And I was on my way to supply school when they went, wait. Instead, we're going to give you away to, I don't know who they give him away to, Special Warfare School down in Fort Bragg, which was Special Forces in those days and Psychological Operations, which had been rebranded from Psychological Warfare. It was a perfect fit for me. So off I went to Fort Bragg and went through their training in Fort Bragg. But when I was coming out of Aberdeen, they'd already told me that I was going to be the commanding officer of the 32nd Psychological Operations Detachment. It smelled like, and it was, on its way to Vietnam. It's a 3-man team. I had a sergeant and a enlisted a Spec 4, and that was the entire 32nd Psychological Operations Detachment. We spent about a year there at Fort Bragg, and then I believe it was in July of 67, they loaded us all up with 6 other teams, psychological operations teams. We all flew down to Atlanta in the middle of the night, on out to San Diego, arriving the following morning, and got on the John Pope troop ship and sailed out for 17 days to White Beach, Okinawa, and then on for another 5 days to Da Nang. Got rid of 2,000 Marines, as I recall, were on board with us. And on down to Vung Tau, where we came in and waded, we waded ashore through the water. It's straight out of Apocalypse Now or later movies, but it's true. Past people were sunbathing and floating in the water and so on, dark gear and so on. And then towards that evening of when we arrived in, which was now probably latter part of August, that night my men and I were flown up to Nha Trang and became part of at that time, the 245th Psychological Operations Company. Had, I think, 11 detachments scattered around 2 corps. There were 4 corps areas, 1, 2, 3, 4. Marines were running 1 corps, known as I Corps. We were 2 corps, by far the largest geographically, and then 3 Saigon area and around there, and then the Mekong Delta was the 4th corps area. And from after a few days, maybe a few more days there, our equipment was catching up with us, and we were sent down to Phan Thiet. I always spell these for you, Phantiet, and we became attached to the 2nd of the 7th 1st Airmobile Cav Division, Gary Owen Division. Gary Owen. I think that was, I can't forget. Anyway, it was a famed regiment, and we were down there from probably the latter part of August, early September of '67 to November 1st, when the 245th Psychological Operations Company up in Nha Trang became the 8th Battalion Group, and I became the head of intelligence, the S2, and was moved up from Phan Thiet up to Nha Trang, where I stayed for the better part of the next 6, 8, 9 months until about May, when it was getting pretty short. I was getting May of '68 probably. In that time, we went through Tet, I'll sort of tell you about, at some point, which was in January of 1968. And then in May or so, I was getting ready to go home, and the embassy and was looking to start a magazine called Mutual Understanding, THONG CAM, THONG CAM. They had a logo, and they had arranged, they decided that it was going to be a pattern on cultural magazines, nothing about the war, cultural magazine, to honor and be for the 135,000 Vietnamese employees of the U.S. government. And they were looking around, they wanted to fast track this thing. And they kept looking around to find somebody, and they finally looked over at the 8th Battalion. They found me. I had a master's degree. I had a reporting experience. I was a pretty seasoned guy in terms of reporting and editing. And I was pretty seasoned in Vietnam by that time. I'd been out with both the 101st, who supplanted the 2nd and the 7th down in Phan Thiet. And of course, I'd been through Tet. So I was about as seasoned as you're going to find an officer. By that time, I was a captain. And so essentially they recruited me. They said, come down to Saigon, talk to a couple of days. So I flew down to Saigon, met with this fellow, one of the top civilian guys. And he said, we promised, and I promised everything. Look, I'm going home. I'm going home in about 6 weeks, 7 weeks. I said, well, I'm all right, go. You know, at least go out to Japan and Philippines and South Korea and take a look at what we're doing there, and then come on back and give me your thoughts and give me a hand on getting this thing up on its legs, because we want this thing in 90 days to have 10,000 circulation in Saigon, both a print edition and both a Vietnamese edition and a English edition in black and white. We got it's all set up to go at the Printing Publication Center up in Tokyo. So go out and tell me what you think and come on back, and I did. And we sat down, we talked about it, and we hit it off. I really like this guy. He said, I've got your back. We got to get this thing done. We want 135,000 circulation on this thing within 6 months. And we'll back you. Just make it happen. Go hire 10 Vietnamese. Essentially, they're running this as setting up a totally separate operation. We're going to set it up in the rail yards in Saigon, which they did. Gave me a Quonset hut. And it was hard to pass up. So in return for extending another 6 months, which I did do, they were sending you anywhere you wanted to go in the world. So I went to Geneva. I went to Europe for a month. And when I came back, I'd already gotten it going, and then we really got it going. And towards the end of the year, I was called back to the United States. My mother was dying, and did in fact die Christmas of 1968. But before I came home, before I left Saigon, we were very close to really getting this thing notched up and really running. I was now working 3 editions ahead. The staff was performing. I didn't really want to leave it, and I could have left it when I went back home. They would have reassigned me back to somewhere, because I only had a couple months left in the military. I said, listen, let me come back. So I came back, and I stayed another 3 months in Vietnam, and came back in, I believe, March or April, and left the military at that point. So that's kind of the arc from becoming an officer, being married, come back home. And by the way, as soon as I could, I didn't have any further obligation, maybe had another half year or so, and no reserve unit. I couldn't find a reserve unit to join. I didn't really need to. And by the end of 1969, I bought a newspaper, and I was not in a position to, if they called me back in, it would decimate my business. By the way, that had happened to my brother-in-law during the Cuban Missile Crisis. My brother-in-law in St. Louis had an insurance agent he inherited from his father's ongoing concern, and he was in the reserves, and bam, they pulled him up, and he spent 6 months, and he did recover, but not by much. And so because of that, I resigned my commission in probably late 69 or 1970, and everybody thanked one another, and that was the end of my military service.